It's the weekend. Be good to yourself. It's Katz's Corner with Dr. Aaron Katz and Dr. Philippa Cheatham, where you can get simple, straightforward answers to your questions about health, from diet and supplements to lifestyle changes. To reach Dr. Katz and Dr. Cheatham, call 800-848-WABC. Now, live on 77 WABC, the chairman of urology at Winthrop University Hospital in New York, with co-host Philippa Cheatham, attending in urology at Winthrop University Hospital. Here is Dr. Aaron Katz.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to another live round of Katz's Corner here on WABC Radio in New York. I'm your host, Dr. Aaron Katz, and I am live here on this Sunday morning here in December, and so glad that you could join us today. Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone is having a wonderful, healthy, and happy and joyous holiday season. My wonderful co-host, Dr. Philippa Cheatham, is away. She's with her family in the UK, but we are here at 1-800-848-WABC. If you have a question this morning, our topic is going to be a very important and timely one that I've asked a guest to join us in the studio, and his name is Dr. Mark Wilkenfeld. He is the chief of the Division of Occupation and Environmental Medicine at Winthrop University Hospital out in Mineola, New York. And we're going to be talking this morning about a new study that came out this past week in the Journal of the American Medical Association, showing the associated risk between many different types of cancer and exposure to, the exposure that the first responders had down at the World Trade Center. An important, timely topic. There has been an act, the Zadroga Act, which has been taken place and has been used, the money of $2.7 billion to cover a lot of the medical illnesses that have occurred to the responders and people that were living in the area at the time of 9/11. Initially, the Zadroga Act did not cover for cancer, and then recently, back in September, they found that, we should be covering for cancers because there's a lot of cancers, prostate cancer being one of them, that has been found to be associated with exposure to the environmental exposures and the toxins in the environment at the time of 9/11. And then recently, this paper was just published, showing that maybe there isn't an increased risk or the development of specific cancers. So to help us answer that, I've asked Mark Wilkenfeld again. He is the chief of the Division of Occupational Environmental Medicine. He is an expert in environmental medicine and the impact of 9/11 on its victims and first responders. He treats many of these patients. In fact, Winthrop, I will tell you, is the only site in Nassau County to take care of the 9/11 responders. There are 2,500 responders that are living in Nassau County. And Mark Wilkenfeld is in charge of taking care of all of them. He's been recently in the New York Best magazine for best doctors and actually one of the only doctors and best magazine for environmental and occupational medicine. And you can hear and learn more about him at winthrop.org. Good morning, Mark, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Dr. Katz. It's a pleasure to be back here again.
Yes, you've been here before, and when you were here, we were talking about the cancers.
Right.
And so tell us what, on a day-to-day basis, because you see these guys that, these responders that really, let's face it, these are American heroes.
Mm-hmm. They are true heroes. And I was here back in September when you asked me about the cancers. I said the government was about to accept a recommendation of an expert advisory panel to include cancers as a covered condition. And they added about 50 cancers to the list, not including prostate, by the way. So we see a great deal of responders that are sick, and they're sick with a variety of illnesses. They're sick with asthma, sick with sinus and nasal problems, sick with GERD and that all comes from inhaling and digesting while you're inhaling all of the toxic particles that were present after the collapse of the World Trade Center. And, these men and women, as you said, they're true American heroes, and they work selflessly. They tell the stories of working 20 hours and sleeping at the site for 4 hours month after month after month. And unfortunately, now they're coming in sick. And recently since all the news came out about the cancer and this droga bill started to cover it, we've had people coming with cancer.
And these cancers that people are developing, do you think that it's because they were breathing in the fumes? Because initially they weren't even wearing masks or had respirators on. So was it that they were breathing in, or just that the toxins in the environment, the toxins they got in through their skin somehow? Or
that's an excellent question. So don't forget that originally these responders were told that the air is safe to breathe and not to worry. That was a statement that was made September the 14th, 2001.
Who made that statement?
That was the EPA. That said that.
How could they say that? I mean, what information would they have to say? They were just trying to keep people down there so that they could continue to work?
That's a very good question. I don't think anyone knows the answer to that, but we just know that statement. What we do know is that statement was made, and that statement was incorrect. That people were certainly exposed to a variety of toxins, including chemicals that we never saw before. Because don't forget, when we study chemicals, we're used to studying an individual chemical. Down there were thousands of chemicals, and the heat was 2,000, 5,000 degrees, so you had everything mixing.
Yeah, and not only the chemicals from the building, but also chemicals from the planes, right?
Correct.
And all the fumes and the gasoline and the petrol and
everything all mixed together. There were 5,000 tons of chrysotile asbestos in one of the World Trade Center towers.
Now, cancer takes cancer doesn't happen overnight, right? And so we're probably going to be seeing, it's been 10 years now, right? We're probably going to see more cancers develop because, when you get exposed to a radiation or a toxin, it may take 20 years for a cancer to develop. So first of all, how are we going to pay for all this? Because I know there was $2.7 billion that was put aside to take care of all diseases. So now we're saying that we're going to cover all these cancers that are going to develop. And, so I guess one concern is how are we going to pay for it? And also, how do we know if someone gets a cancer 15 years after being down at 9/11 that it was from 9/11?
Right. Those are both very good questions. So, first of all, what you're talking about is the latency period. It takes years, usually many years. In the case of mesothelioma, which is a cancer from asbestos, it can take 40 years to develop. So we're just starting, we believe, to see the very beginnings of this.
Yeah, I mean, this is a major health issue. If you're just waking up, we're talking to Dr. Mark Welkenfeld, who is the Chief of Occupational and Environmental Medicine at Winthrop University Hospital and really an expert in environmental medicine and its impact on the responders at 9/11. And if you have a question or, if you're a first responder, give us a call. I'd love to hear from you this morning and your experience with your health and how you've had to pay for medical bills. That's what we're going to get into at 1-800-848-9222. Mark, you see these men and women every day at your center at Winthrop. What is there any common themes that you see? Anything that that kind of stands out? Well,
there's a couple of things that stand out. One of them is not medical. One of them is the heroism and the selflessness that these people really exhibited. They even say that they feel guilty. I mean, people come in feeling guilty that they couldn't do more. These are people that ran into fires and horrible situations, and it's just amazing. The common illnesses that we see are what you would expect from breathing in toxic materials. And when you breathe something in, you also swallow it. So we see asthma. We see GERD, which is reflux. We see nasal and sinus problems. We see sleep apnea as an associated condition. And we also see a fair amount of psychiatric disease. I mean, to go through a trauma like that and not have some effect psychologically, whether it's depression or PTSD, would be quite remarkable.
And when you see someone, the guilt is, that's a very common theme among many of these tragedies that we see. Even, recently here in New York, and I know you were taking care of a lot of the people that were involved with Hurricane Sandy,
right,
and dealing with their exposure. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, their exposure, because even though it wasn't maybe some chemical exposure, there are a lot of toxins that people were probably exposed to. Did you see that in your center?
Yeah. So, first of all, the same responders, it's 10 years later, the same responders that spent months helping out at the Trade Center site after 9/11, these same people went to help out at Sandy. Right,
wow.
They went to the wreckage, and the horrible situations, and it had an effect on people. First of all, they missed their appointments because if it came to a choice of coming to see the doctor or going out to help some other people, you know what these people are going to do. And second of all, it brings up memories. I walked around Lower Manhattan right after Sandy, and it actually had that same feeling as after 9/11. There was no power. The streets were empty. It was very airy. So that's, first of all, psychological effects. Also with Sandy, as with Katrina, we know that after a hurricane, there are problems with things like mold, concrete dust, and people start to get respiratory problems. Maybe not on the scale that we see from 9/11, but they do get problems, mainly from mold, from cleaning up mold. And one of the things I just want to make sure that all your listeners know is that you can protect yourself if you're doing a cleanup and for large areas we recommend professionals, but if you're cleaning up your own home, the one thing that you can do is put on an N95 respirator, which you can get at any hardware store, and it costs a couple of dollars, and that will protect you to a certain degree from the particles getting into your lungs.
An N95 respirator.
N95 respirator.
And a respirator that only costs a couple of dollars?
That's it, yeah.
Sounds like it's a big, I'm used to a big machine. This
is a small, it's a plastic mask with a nasal clip, and it'll keep out a lot of the particles. Again, it's not 100%, but it's much better than nothing.
Yeah, there is this, you were telling me before the show this morning, a Rockaway cough now that has developed. Is that from the mold and things? Right,
it's from the mold. It's also from, with a lot of the renovations, there was concrete dust. There was also probably, elevated amounts of sand in the atmosphere. You can go out to Long Beach and see huge mountains of sand that have been piled up by the beach. So after Katrina, people started to cough, and they called it Katrina cough. And we started to see it in people from the Rockaways, and it's been coined Rockaway cough.
Yeah. Now, and you were saying that you are the only recognized site in Nassau County at Winthrop University Hospital for taking care and part of the Zadroga Act, which will cover the medical and the drug costs, right?
Right, exactly.
So if someone was down there and now they have asthma or cancer, that they know, irrespective of their insurance, or if they have no insurance, that they... I guess you have to go through some process and make sure that they were down there.
Right.
And I don't know how you do that,
well,
but you have to verify, I guess. But once you go through this verification process, then all their health care is covered.
Right. Well, it's actually a two-step process. So we will work along with Stony Brook, which has the contract with the government to cover all of Long Island, and that they have clinics in Suffolk, in Nassau, and in Brooklyn. Okay, so there's a two-step process to get your medical conditions, your treatments, and your drug costs covered. The first part of the process is actually getting certified by the government that you qualify as a responder. Okay, so you have to submit an application, and the government certifies that you actually work down there, and therefore you can be in the program. Then you go into the program, and the physicians will send in medical information saying, we'd like to certify this person for asthma. We'd like to certify this person for depression. And since September, we're going to be able to start, and I believe it has started already, certifying people for cancer. So what does that mean? That means that the medical papers go back to a government doctor, he reviews it, and signs off and says, okay, you can treat this person. And that will include all of the treatment costs, including medication, which, as you know, can be very, very, very expensive.
It certainly can be extremely expensive. Just having experience with my own son who's been through cancer therapy, if we didn't have proper insurance, it winds up in the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm just thinking, so you're saying it has to go through a government doctor and I'm thinking, and if I was listening out there and I'm just sitting here thinking, wow, this is probably another one of these government bureaucracies. It's going to take a long time. Here I have cancer. They're going to have to, check all this. Is it a long process, or it can be expedited?
Usually, it's not a long process. We also have the ability, while we're diagnosing people, we can treat them until certification comes through. So very often there's things that we can do because our primary concern as doctors is to help the patients.
Yeah. And have you set up any particular? And by the way, if you're just waking up, it's dark. On Katz's Corner this morning, we're very privileged to have in the studio Dr. Mark Wilkenfeld, who is head of the Occupational Environmental Medicine at Winthrop and taking care of all the 9/11 responders. The recent article that came out in JAMA this week, Mark, there was some question, but in terms of cancer risk and, having been exposed to 9/11, but it seems like there are a few cancers that really went up very high, excessive risk. And one of them was prostate cancer.
Right.
The only environmental toxin that I know of that the government has said, yes, this agent, which basically was Agent Orange, guys that were exposed in Vietnam, that were exposed to Agent Orange, clearly had an excess risk of prostate cancer, and the VA will cover those patients. But now
Correct.
we're seeing that 43% increased risk of prostate cancer if you were exposed at 9/11.
Right.
And have you seen that?
Well, yeah, we have seen prostate cancer cases. As I said before, they are not on the list, so there is no way yet to certify or treat them. Now, you talk about Agent Orange, which is a dioxin. We know that with fires burning and all kinds of chemicals mixing, it wouldn't be surprising if you got similar chemical exposures. But, I think the point is that we know that these men and women were exposed to carcinogens in their work. We know that they're getting cancer. Now, we can argue for the next 60 years and review multiple studies and, try to figure out which is increased and which is not increased. The evidence early on is that there is an increase in cancers, and a lot of us believe that everything should be covered.
Yeah, well, I think so. And then, the question is, if you've been exposed, should you go through a more rigorous type of a screening program, And by the way, if you're out there listening and you'd like to give us a call and you were a first responder or just have a question about this issue, it's 1-800-848-9222 here in the morning on Katz's Corner. And, the question is if you've, we all do screening programs for prostate cancer for men over 50, let's say, with the PSA, and there's some controversy about that, but women with mammograms. But, if you've been exposed, do you think that, these men and women should have a more rigorous screening? And then again, if they are going to go through a rigorous program, who's going to pay for it?
Right, so that's a great question. So there is talk now, and we don't have the details yet, that there will be screenings covered, including perhaps colonoscopies, mammograms. Again, PSA is up for discussion now because, prostate is not included yet. And I specify yet.
Yeah.
So, people with exposures, the same way that we do medical monitoring on asbestos-exposed populations, we believe that these people should have screening for cancers.
Yeah. And then, if you have been exposed and, you're out there and you're concerned about the risk of this, do you make any recommendations, Mark? I mean, do you in your program at Winthrop, do you think that there's a role for any type of detoxification?
Right.
It's a little controversial, the whole detox thing, but there are a lot of centers that are doing that. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're really trying to get involved in is smoking cessation, because detox is a very controversial area about getting toxins out of the body. But we do know that, unfortunately, for some responders and for the American population in general, people are smoking, right? So what you want to do if you're exposed to a toxin is, first of all, not add any other toxins to that body burden.
Yeah, but that's difficult to do, especially if you're living here in New York City, right?
It's tougher, but there are things that you can do. You can exercise, you can eat well,
right?
And the major thing really for the smokers would be to stop smoking.
Oh, 100%. Well, we agree with that. We're going to go to the phones now. We have a call from Bob in West Orange, New Jersey. Thanks for tuning in, Bob. You have a question?
Yeah, from what I have read, the World Trade Center was built before PCBs were banned, and there were a lot of PCBs in the World Trade Center. When PCBs are burned at high temperature, like what happened with the fires from the jets crashing into it, they turn into dioxins. I think that can give us some insight into what's happening with dioxin and prostate cancer because of the relationship between burning the PCBs and the fact that they turn into dioxin when it burns at high temperature.
Right, Bob. So you're absolutely correct. There were PCBs in various forms within the Trade Center, and heating them would convert them into dioxins. We know that dioxins can exist actually in any large fire. So yes, the two do go together.
Bob, were you exposed down there, or you just?
No, I was not. I was very fortunate. I was not there.
Right. What are your thoughts about that, Mark?
Again, I think that there is significant evidence that we should include all the cancers, and again, it's based on common sense. And what really changed my mind was when I went to an early public meeting, and I heard all kinds of talks of studies, and a responder stood up and he said, "I'm very happy that you doctors and scientists are studying this, but I have cancer, I don't have insurance, and I really can't wait 15 years until you finish all your studies."
Exactly.
And I think that for us that's really the point. We can study this forever.
Yeah. Well, this study that just came out did show that there was an excess risk of prostate cancer, thyroid cancer, And then another one that's not that common, myelomas,
Right.
Which is a bloodborne cancer.
Right.
What do you think's going on there? Why are we seeing more of these myelomas?
Well, this is the second study. There was a study in the Journal of Occupational Environmental Medicine a couple of years ago that showed that there was more myeloma in younger responders than you would expect. And we know that certain cancers are more sensitive to chemicals, and they come on quicker. One of those is a blood cancer. The other one would be a thyroid cancer. So the latency period for those cancers is shorter, and you can start to see them, in 4 or 5 years or possibly even less. So I think, again, this is evidence that there is a carcinogenic effect of working downtown in Lower Manhattan after 9/11.
Overall, you said there's about 2,500 responders that you see at your center there, right?
In Nassau County, 2,500. In total, I believe there's about 60,000. And this is really, it's interesting. This is actually a nationwide phenomenon, because don't forget, crews came from Wyoming, they came from California, they came from every state in the nation to come help out. So there are clinics where they can be seen throughout the country, and there's about 60,000 responders. We're talking about 60,000 responders.
Yeah, I think you're doing an amazing job, Mark, really, an incredible job, and one that you're really, as we said, you're taking care of American heroes. People come from all over the country to, we've seen it recently here in Sandy, we saw it in 9/11, we see it in Katrina, and they need to know that if they're going to risk their lives for individuals and expose themselves to potentially, lethal and dangerous toxins, that they need to have some insurance and be covered. And thankfully we have this act, and thankfully they've now covered these 50 cancers, and hopefully they'll continue to do that. I think that there's a time limit, though, of, how long will they cover this? Because
right.
You can't do it indefinitely. I mean, I think it's only for the next 5 years, right? And then what?
Well, it's a total of 5 years. So the act was started in 2011. It will end in 2016, and then it's going to, there's going to have to be more funding. So it was a huge political fight to get this passed. And we're hoping that it won't be such a big fight for the next round. I think it would make sense for Congress to appropriate funds without an ending, because they have to go back every few years and do this. Originally, the funding was for 1 year.
Yeah. Well, I have, I guess some thoughts and concerns. I mean, with Obamacare coming and with the fiscal crisis and so forth, do you feel that the current administration anyway, which would probably be involved in making some recommendations for continued coverage, is going to be in favor of continued coverage here? I mean, do you have any sense about the administration?
Right. So, first of all, I want to say that our congressional delegation from New York, including our senators, Schumer and Gillibrand and Peter King, and I don't want to leave anyone out, Carol Maloney, but they were extremely forceful in getting this passed. A lot of the other members of Congress initially looked at this as an entitlement issue. But I think it's really an American heroism issue. And if you're going to spend money, I know we spend a lot of money on a lot of different things, but I think if you're going to spend money, one of the things you should be spending it on is on people that are sick. Now, if people went to sacrifice their lives and ran down selflessly for months and months, right, and now they're sick, I don't think there's any issue. I think that somehow we have to find the money.
Absolutely right. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I just hope that it just doesn't come down to the to the finances and to politicians and to
Well, I don't think human life should be considered cheap. And people are sick and they need treatment. And medically we have some wonderful clinicians and wonderful scientists working on it. And I think this program really deserves funding.
When patients come out to your center at Winthrop, and you were talking earlier, and again, we're talking with Mark Wilkenfeld, who is the chief of occupational environmental medicine at Winthrop, an expert on 9/11, and runs the responders clinic there, the only site in Nassau County for 9/11 responders. When you see these men and women, and you touched a little bit about the emotional aspect, and of course the stress. Do you have something at the center to help them with that?
Right.
Not just yourself, but do you have an infrastructure where you send them to psychologists or therapists or
Right. So as I said,
or support groups or things like that?
We're working in conjunction with Stony Brook, which has placed 2 social workers on site at the center. Okay, so they can provide any kind of psychotherapy. They also have a network of psychiatrists because, sometimes it's good to get a little bit of medicine to try to get over the edge. So the mental health aspects are very well known. And I know that Dr. Luft's group is now doing studies because we believe that there's a connection between having post-traumatic stress disorder and medical problems. There's definitely a mind-body connection to this.
Is there a support group, though, for these men and women? I mean, that would be something, I'm just thinking to start, if it hasn't been, just so that other people can talk about the issues that they went through and, similar things.
Right. I think it's a great idea. I know that the Bellevue program, which is for people that live downtown, lived or work downtown, not as responders, they do have a support group. Now, don't forget that a lot of these men and women are very, very, very stoic. And it can take a while even to get them to talk about it.
Absolutely right.
They're always saying, there's nothing wrong with me. I didn't go through anything. My friends really suffered, or I lost a friend. So how can I feel, bad for myself? So I think, in particular with these men and women, it is a slower process to get them to realize. But I think you're absolutely right. That would be an excellent idea.
Yeah, not only the stress, the guilt, as you mentioned earlier.
Terrible guilt. Yeah.
And we see that time and time again when people go through a traumatic thing, whether it be 9/11, whether it be survivors of the Holocaust, which this was. This was another Holocaust.
Well, there are a lot of people that died and a lot of people that suffered, and fortunately we have a lot of very, very caring physicians, social workers, and others to help out with this. And I can't even imagine the Holocaust. There were 6 million Jews died, and millions of people were involved. But, this is a smaller group, but, like I said, we're very, very fortunate to have the caring clinicians involved. And we have experience in this now, too. When we hear a story, although, we do hear new stories every day. We hear about people that were holding hands with their partner and they let go and they never saw them again.
Well, that's the music, Mark. Thank you. You were a terrific guest and running a terrific program, outstanding program at Winthrop University Hospital, the only site in Nassau County for 9/11 responders. That's Dr. Mark Wilkenfeld. He runs the center, and you can check him out at winthrop.org. Tune in, everyone. Have a wonderful week. We have a show next week for you where we'll recap the entire 2012. So glad you could join with us. This is Dr. Aaron Katz.